We all know water as the most important molecule of them all in order to support life. When people look for different planets that might have life on, the one thing that they look for is not carbon or oxygen or nitrogen, it is water, because it is so incredibly helpful for life to be sustained. One of the main things that it does is, surprise surprise, hydrolysis and condensation reactions, two of the most important metabolizing reactions to form the energy that our bodies need to continue working. The second thing that it does is it's an amazing solvent, meaning that things can dissolve in it quite readily if they are partially charged or charged. Think of putting some salt in water. Salt is NaCl. It is a substance that has both positive charged ions and negatively charged ions, and due to the structure of water with the dipoles in water, you will see that the salt is absorbed by the water molecules. This means that when we have plasma and other transport fluids, if they are water-based, they will have a very high tendency to carry other molecules as well, such as sugars and salts, like we mentioned. Without this, we would have to have a direct transport system, much like insects have with their gas exchange system, and it would require us to be a lot smaller than we are now and to have a constant influx of new molecules. But because of our transport system, we can have large mammals, for example, like the blue whale and elephant, and we can also have our sized bodies with large brains that are energy demanding. Another important factor for mainly aquatic life is that when energy is applied to water, the amount of energy that it takes to increase the water surface by 1 degree Celsius is very, very high. We call this a specific heat capacity. Because of this, aquatic life doesn't require an amazing thermoregulatory system like humans or dogs, and can instead focus on other parts of evolution, such as eating and, swimming, which is why many creatures around the water are cold-blooded, because they don't necessarily need to worry about changing of the water temperature. Another thing about water is that the evaporation process has very high latent heat. The state change from liquid to gas is very, very energy intensive. It requires not only the energy to get it to the temperature, but also the energy to push it over that state change. Because of this, the high latent heat means that when you've got a body of water, it's unlikely to fully evaporate. But if it does, the process of evaporation is also endothermic, meaning that the water that is released will effectively take with it some of that energy. And this lowers the rate of evaporation of a body of water, because the body of water is no longer having as much energy applied to it, because some of it has been taken away by the reaction that occurs, and the entire system cools slightly every time a water molecule evaporates. The final thing is that water is a very cohesive molecule. Cohesion is simply the ability of a molecule to stick to itself. So in water's case, if you have a body of water, the polar bonds in water will stick to each other. The positive side of the hydrogen and the negative side of the oxygen are naturally attracted to each other, and they will form things called hydrogen bonds. Hydrogen bonds aren't technically bonds, as we discussed in the DNA video, but are quite strong for intermolecular forces. During things like transpiration in a plant, where the water moves up the stem, the water molecules will be more likely to follow that initial water molecule due to the high cohesion, meaning the plant needs to spend less energy on getting the water from the bottom, so the roots, all the way up to its leaves to transpire. We can see this effect quite easily by watching rain fall down a window. When the rain droplets get close to each other, you will see them merge together and then push down quite quickly. And if another one comes along and follows the same path of that water droplet, you'll see the speed is a lot higher than if it was to go down the dry window. That's again due to the cohesion of water. It's easy to have it pull along the water molecules. It's important to note that water is also slightly adhesive, but only to polar substances. So if we were to mix water and oil, they're not going to mix because oil is non-polar, whereas water is polar. And as a general rule, like dissolves like. In the case of alcohol, where we saw with the lipids, alcohol is soluble in both water and oil, and that's because alcohol has an OH bond up towards its head, and the rest of its body is simply a chain of hydrogen and carbon, which is non-polar. Because of this, depending on the size of the alcohol, water is able to surround it, and oil is also able to surround it. And again, depending on the position of the OH and the size of the molecule, it will be more soluble in one or the other.